it's hard for me to really say that he lost the beef when he's still the number one artist. If you guys did all this for him to basically go back and sell what he always sells or sells more than what he was selling, like, what was the point of all this? Like, it's crazy. It's like somebody punched you in the face. You hit them back, and then you're like, oh, you know what? I'm sorry I hit you. I don't want to fight anymore. It's like you ended up winning 5 Grammys or 6 Grammys or whatever the case is, and your album to come out and you sell as much as Playboi Carti. It's a kind of a crazy look. All right, it's officially been a year since this rap beef started. A lot of people have had their opinions since, you know, everything's happened, but truth be told, a lot of times, you know, people's opinions aren't valid. A lot of people think that Kendrick won, but honestly, I don't think that's the case. At this point, 3 people have tried to destroy Drake in terms of destroying his career and his run, and it hasn't happened. So I don't know how you could really see anything that's been brought against Drake at this point as a win. So just to recap, last year, basically, March 26th or around March 17th, Future, Metro, and Future and Metro, they premiered a song at Rolling Loud, California. And yeah, they were on the stage at Rolling Loud, California, and Travis Scott was on the stage as well. And yeah, they premiered a song, and people thought it was just a song that was coming off their album or going to be on their album. Lo and behold, when the song actually comes out a few days later, it's actually featuring Kendrick, and it's a diss towards Drake. So the album's name was We Don't Trust You. And the whole album, well, not the whole album, but the whole basis or synopsis of the album was shots at Drake. Till this day, people don't really know why Metro, you know, had an issue with Drake. And realistically, I don't think people know any reason, like have any reason as to why Future had an issue with Drake as well. But we all know why Kendrick had an issue with Drake. Jealousy is what most people cite it as, but it could be something else. So yeah, they released that song March 26th, and Kendrick was on it, basically getting at Drake and J. Cole for their song, First Person Shooter, in which J. Cole mentioned the big 3, which was he deemed as Kendrick, Drake, and him. And I don't know why, but Kendrick took that as a diss. And till this day, I say the reason why this beef started wasn't because Kendrick took that specific song or specific bar as a diss. I feel like Kendrick was at a point where he was at the end of his relationship with TDE, and he needed something to kind of like spark his new label, PG Lang, and all that stuff. So he needed something to kind of like shake up the story for him, because realistically, Kendrick releases every, 3 to 5 years, and you know, whenever he releases, you know, the albums sell well or whatever, but that's really it. Like, he just releases the albums, and then you just wait for the next 3 or 4 years or 5 years to come so that he could release his next album. So I think he really took this as an opportunity to try to like get his status or whatever elevated, and just to kind of like catapult himself into, I guess, a new stratosphere, you would say. That disc came out March 26th, and then on April 7th or April 5th, because Drake and J. Cole were on tour up until April 5th, J. Cole dropped a song called 7 Minute Drill, basically responding to Kendrick and saying, heard somebody's dissing, like, we only would, just like Drake have said before too, like, we would only be mentioning you if you were dissing. We wouldn't be mentioning you if it was for anything else. And he basically kind of dissed his catalog and said, your first album was a classic, but the last album that you dropped was tragic, which was basically what a lot of people thought, to be real with you. And everyone thought, like, you know, everyone was waiting for Drake to respond as well. But once J. Cole responded, everyone was kind of excited, because it's like, oh, you know, we didn't expect Kendrick to diss J. Cole, but J. Cole's the first one that responded. Lo and behold, 2 days later, J. Cole ends up taking down the track and apologizing to Kendrick. And a lot of people basically saw it as weak. It did look weak, because how are you going to put out a song basically responding to someone that sent a shot at you, and then you take it back and say, I apologize? I don't know. It didn't make sense to a lot of people. And for those people that call hip hop a sport, it didn't make a lot of sense to them as well, because it's like, all right, where's the competitive nature in this if you're just cowering in the corner after having a good response, to be real with you, because a 7 Minute Drill was a good response. And then you just 2 days later change your mind saying, oh, I couldn't sleep. Take your best shot, blah, blah, blah. And so it continues on. Kendrick never responded anymore to J. Cole. April I want to say 10th to 15th, Drake, his first diss record leaked. Unfortunately, because I do think had because if you were on social media at that time, a lot of people were, or Drake and his team were basically telling Kendrick to drop because they had been made aware that Kendrick had like 10 songs in the tucker ready to go for the beef, which again is kind of weird because it's like if you're in a situation where you each are dropping tracks, you should be dropping tracks as things go along. You shouldn't have things ready to go. Like you should be, I guess you could have like ideas ready to go, but not just have full songs ready to go. Because what are you going to respond to if you just have the songs ready to put out? And so Drake's song, Push Ups, ended up leaking. And I think on Academic Stream, he ended up giving him the real version. And it was a little bit more polished. And he ended up dropping it on DSPs. And yeah, that was the first offering. And that was April 15th, I think. And then 2 days later, I believe, he dropped Tailor Made on Instagram. It was an AI track with Tupac, Snoop Dogg, and Drake. Drake wrote all 3 verses, basically telling Kendrick, you started this, like, let's go, let's get it going, because we've been waiting for a while now for you to respond. And April, I want to say late April 30th is when Drake finally responded to, April 30th is when Kendrick responded to Drake with Euphoria. So that was Kendrick's first offering, and basically he was, regurgitating a lot of stuff that I had already seen on Twitter about Drake, how Drake was like an alcoholic, his previous beef with Pusha T, he's referencing that. I think he was referencing the Tupac ring, the beef with Pharrell, and just basically saying like Drake is not who we think he is. And I believe after that, he dropped 616 in LA as well. If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he dropped 616 in LA. And the cover art was basically like some random stuff that they found in a suitcase. And they said it was Drake's suitcase, and it was some pills and some other stuff. And it was more as the same stuff. Like Kendrick was basically talking about Drake. He's talking about people looking compromised, like academics. I think this is it's where he actually started to talk about some of Drake's members too, saying people around Drake don't really view him as he thinks they view him as, and they're just there because he's the support system for them. Like he basically gives them money. And he even mentioned Baca too. If you guys don't know, Baca's one of Drake's artists. I think he signed to OVO now. And the one thing that kind of pissed me off in this beat, specifically referencing Baca, like I think in Not Like Us, he had the line where he says, Baca got a weird case, why is he around? One thing that pissed me off with this beef, in terms of like the Kendrick fans, whatever Kendrick said basically went. You had the situation with that where he was saying, Baca had a weird case, why are you around? I don't think anyone's ever bothered to actually look into this case and see what it was. Baca never had any case that had to deal with any, stuff with any minors or anything. He had an assault case, which was... I have the article here, and if you'll see it, this is from the Toronto Sun. This is when he got arrested. Savory, which is Baca, and the victim became involved in the argument when she discovered him passed out drunk at home while French fries were burning in the oven. The victim chastised Savory, and he pushed her to the floor. She lay in shock, crying for an hour, and he apologized to the woman who worked as an escort. And a few weeks later, she reported it to police. So that's the weird case that Kendrick was referring to. But whatever. You know what? His fans can believe whatever they want, but like I said, if they bothered to do an ounce of research, they would see a lot of the stuff he was saying was bullshit. So I think after that, that's when Drake released Family Matters May 3rd, a 7-minute song, basically getting at everybody that came at him. So at that point, it was Rick Ross, A$AP Rocky, Kendrick, Future, Metro, and a bunch of other people too. And he basically had 3 verses for all of them. I was in New York when this song dropped, and I saw the reaction to it. And I was still in New York when the next song dropped from Kendrick, which was like 30 minutes later. So Kendrick was basically waiting for Drake to drop. Some people allegedly said that he got the drop from somebody on Drake's label, basically telling him when they were going to drop. And that's why he was able to drop 30 minutes after. But he dropped that song, and 30 minutes later, Kendrick dropped Meet the Grams. More of the same. Kendrick saying, Drake, you're this, you're that, you're an alcoholic. You're talking about his son, basically saying, oh, your dad's a terrible person. A A verse that everyone seems to want to forget is the third verse, in where he says he's mentioning Drake having a daughter. Till this day, no daughter has ever come out, or nobody has ever come out basically saying, "Oh yeah, I'm Drake's daughter," or "I'm Drake's baby mom's," or whatever the case is. So again, Kendrick fans, they looked at that and they said, "Yeah, you know what? It's beef. Like let's just that never happened." Like it's basically how they look at it. Like that never happened. And yeah, they didn't hold him accountable in a lot of stuff that he was saying and a lot of stuff that he was doing. Like he wasn't responding to Drake. He was just putting songs out, which people knew at that point. Like he had songs prepared and he just put the songs out. And so the next day, Kendrick dropped Not Like Us. And basically, from people's opinion, that's when the beef was over. And which is something I still don't understand, because Drake dropped The Heart Part 6 afterwards. And people were saying it's basically Drake waving the white flag. And it's something I'm confused about, because literally the last line in the song basically says, "Just let me know when we're getting to the facts. Everything in my shit is facts. I'm waiting on you to return the favor." That doesn't sound like somebody that's saying, "Okay, I give up." Like that sounds like someone that's saying, "All right, you're putting all this shit out. You're putting all these lies out. So come with real evidence, and not just stuff that you hear on Twitter, or not stuff that you like make up." So a lot of people deemed the battle over at that point, and summer kind of started. And so Not Like Us was, I guess, kind of taking a life of its own and going up on the charts. And then Juneteenth, the concert that Kendrick had pop out, people were calling it like a victory lap. Again, this kind of goes back to the point where I was saying Kendrick was using this as a stepping stone to elevate himself and to get more money as he was building his own label, or as he was separating himself from TDE. The pop out, I think, was sponsored by Amazon, and they said Kendrick had gotten paid like $10 million to do the show and to put it on Amazon and stuff. So all the stuff that was going to happen after the beef put Kendrick in a much different position than he was before the beef. The Super Bowl, that pop-out show, the album release, the records being on the charts, him getting copious amounts of like push from the label in terms of radio play. All of that happened after the beef, and none of that was happening before. And there was even situations too where it just seemed like, at that point, it kind of just seemed like the whole industry had kind of turned on Drake. Obviously, for a select few people, of the people that he messed with, but every single person turned on Drake. Even some of Drake's closest friends, like LeBron, you would see him at the concert for Pop Out. He was singing Like That when it released, specifically Kendrick's verse. He was with Steph Curry during the Summer Olympics, and Steph was in a video basically saying, like, "Is this the only song in America? Like, why does everyone keep playing this?" And LeBron's basically seen saying, "I love it, I love it." And yeah, a bunch of stuff. Like, everybody seemed like they turned on Drake. And you know what, truth be told, it had gotten to a point where it seemed a bit dire for Drake, in that sense. It just, with everything going against him, Drake was also in negotiations at that time, or before the beef, actually. He was supposed to be in negotiations with his label to renew his deal. That basically got put on hold because the negotiations, the beef kind of like changed the whole process in terms of the negotiations. So for the label, it kind of made it seem like, all right, so it seems like your public perception has gone down a bit, so we don't have to pay you more than what we paid you. The last deal Drake had with UMG was $400 million. And we don't know for how many albums, but that was the deal. And then it was rumored that he wanted anywhere from 600 to 800 million for his next deal, which, you know, if he already recouped his $400 million deal, why not give him that 600 to 800 million dollars? Because he's going to recoup it again. And go a little bit further. Drake had kind of like stayed quiet for a while. He had done a show at Party, and he had kind of said, he had hinted at an album release that was supposed to come around September, but we really didn't know how it was going to work out because of the issues with the label at that time. And yeah, so it ended up not releasing in the timeline that he had planned it for it to release. But Drake was pretty quiet throughout, you know, the rest of the year up until I want to say January. He had gone on tour in Australia, because he hadn't been to Australia in like 8 years, he had mentioned. He'd gone on tour to Australia. Show had sold out. literally within the first day of them posting the show, everything was sold out. So he did that show, and I think on February 14th this year, he released the album for him and Party, Some Sexy Songs for You. And yeah, that album was met with like, people really thought, and this is where like, you know, one of the points that I have, like people really thought that Drake had fallen off because they hadn't really seen him release music since the beef. And if you look at like how collab albums work, what usually happens is whatever the smaller artist is selling usually will bring down the bigger artist. So Party was probably selling like 40,000 or 50,000 in terms of his albums. Drake was at like 400 or high 300s for his last album. And so a lot of people thought when this album came out that it wasn't going to sell well at all, because not only is Drake seen as falling off, but Party is not a huge artist. He has a big cult following, but he's not a huge artist. So it didn't look good for Drake. Like people were saying, oh, he's going to sell 100, 150, 175, or whatever the case is. He ended up selling like 250 and crickets. I didn't hear anything about anyone that said that, oh, he's going to sell below 200. And so fast forward to kind of like now, you see that Drake has a song on the album, Nokia, and it's still on the charts. And everything Drake's dropped, or the album that he dropped, is basically fighting for its life on the charts. There's actual charts out there where you see how much radio play a record is given. And I've seen a chart specifically dated last week where it showed Luther, in terms of radio spin, had like 10,000 or some radio spins. And then you go down to Nokia and it had like 682 radio spins or something like that. And it's still I think next week it's going to come back at number 5 on the charts. I don't know if it's on there right now. But even with that, Nokia is still on the charts, only based off of streams. And, you know, I think it's only really based off of streams. But for a record to have a spot at number 5 on the charts without any radio play, I don't know if people realize it, but that's kind of crazy. And people are saying, oh yeah, no, he's getting played on the radio. But in comparison to what Kendrick's getting played on the radio, it's not even close. Like Drake is getting played on the radio like a new artist, pretty much. Like 682 spins to 10,000, that's not even close. So that brings me to my point, and the reason why I made this video. Drake, realistically, in my eyes, and a lot of people's eyes, won this beef. The reason is he had literally the whole industry against him. Not only the industry in terms of artists, but the biggest label in the industry was against him as well. And if you look at it, a lot of people that have been in a position to where they've kind of gone like the labels and stuff have been shelved or have been put in positions to where they can't release music. I'll give you an example. Meek Mill hasn't really been shelved by labels, but Meek Mill had a situation where he did the beef with Drake, fell off completely. Then they fixed their situation, and Drake basically came back and gave him a number 1 record. And yeah, Meek Mill has beef with Academics today, and Academics has been on this guy's head for like the last 2 years, and he hasn't really been able to regain his status since then, if you ask me. Anybody who really looks at the label and tries to fight the label, they completely get, hurt to a point where it's like they can't be successful at releasing music anymore. And then when you look at Drake, although Drake is the biggest artist, the amount of stuff that kind of went against, like if you think about it, for someone to have PDF allegations against them and still be able to be a top artist, like he's still, even with the allegations and everything that happened with the beef last year and whatever public perception, he's still been able to retain most of his deals. He's still been able to retain his public image. He's still been able to retain his fan base and a bunch of stuff. It's hard for me to really say that he lost the beef when he's still the number 1 artist in a lot of people's eyes. And it's going to get to a point where this is Kendrick's year or his run or whatever it is. But I'll be real with you. People don't really care for his music like that. Like GNX, after he released it, sold 319. Kendrick's biggest selling album was Damn at 600, I think, or 615 or 619. For you to have the biggest year in your career, like literally the biggest year in your career, you win Super Bowls, you win like I still win Super Bowls. You're slotted to perform at the Super Bowl. You're the favorite for the Grammys for a lot of categories. You ended up winning 5 Grammys or 6 Grammys or whatever the case is. And your album to come out and you sell as much as Playboy Cardi. It's a kind of a crazy look. And it lets people know, like, yeah, like without, certain things being put into Kendrick in terms of like pushing him, nobody would be listening to him. The radio spins, for example, the records that he has on the charts right now, if they didn't have the push from the label, and everyone knows, like, for your song to be played on the radio, that's literally only dependent on the label. If the label's not pushing it and marketing it, your song's not going to get played on the radio. And that shows you Drake's records are not being marketed to be played on the radio. Kendrick's records are being marketed to be played on the radio, and that's why they're staying up there in the charts for so long. If they were getting similar spins, Kendrick would have fallen off like a long time ago in terms of like his placing on the charts. It's hard for me to say that Kendrick is the top guy and he's the winner and all this if in 7 or 8 months from now, or a year from now even, like, is he gonna be at the same level? Is his status gonna stay the same? Like Drake has basically forced Kendrick to work. And I don't know if the reason why Kendrick wasn't releasing at TDE was because he didn't want to, or TDE didn't want them to. I've heard a lot of stuff about TDE in terms of like artists not being able to release. So maybe it was TDE, but Kendrick basically got a fire lit under his ass. He's like, oh shit, I got what I asked for. Let me try and go. Like Kendrick dropped an album a couple months after that beef. That's the most music this guy's probably dropped in years. He did shows. He did the Super Bowl. He had a song called Watch the Party Die, but he was at every damn party. And is that gonna last? For me, in my opinion, I don't think it's gonna last because people weren't really, outside of the pop records that he had and the good albums that he had, people weren't really messing with him like that. Like even his tour right now, if you look at it, it's not selling out, and the tour is gonna start in a month. So it's just like you can already see public perception kind of starting to get back to Drake's side a little bit. And mark my words, I want to put it out there. Before the year is up, I feel like Kendrick takes another shot at Drake. I feel like he's going to get to a point where he sees things slowing down for him and he's going to try and take another shot. And we'll see what happens in terms of, I guess, a round 2 maybe for the beef if it does happen. The only thing I think Drake needs to do right now, his next album, if he drops this year, I think he will, that album has to basically blow all this shit out of the water. And I think it will. From the music that Drake's offered us last month with Some Sexy Songs for You, really good music. But I think this next album, he really has to get into his bag and kind of just show people like, look, I'm still the top guy. And I'm not going to lie to you, in my opinion, I feel like that album sells over 500K. And if that album sells over 500K, I'm not going to know what to, I won't know what to say to people, because if you guys did all this for him to basically go back and sell what he always sells, or sells more than what he was selling, what was the point of all this? And if he sells that album and it gets 500K, UMG will have no choice but to actually give him that new contract that he's asking for. So I think that's all he really needs to do at this point, is just basically get back in the studio and kind of just hunker down or bunker down, or whatever word you want to use, and just make good music. I think that's the only thing, the only way that Drake's really, not the only way that he prevails, but I think that's the only way that in the public's eyes that he regains his status and becomes who everyone thinks of him as. Drake's not someone that really does stuff outside of music. He's not acting. He's not, he has Nocta and stuff, but other than Nocta and the clothing brand and the music, Drake doesn't really do extra stuff like that. And so all he has to do is really just get back in the studio and just drop some hits. And then people's opinions will change. People's perception will change. And the naysayers, or the people that doubted him, will come back and, realize who the best artist was. So honestly, it's just a matter of time. Like I said, once he drops that album, Listen, y'all better figure out the summer, figure out what y'all want to do, because it's gonna get back to the point where Drake's gonna be the top dog, and y'all gonna have to, no pun intended, he's gonna be the top dog, and y'all just gonna have to figure out what to do with Kendrick. But again, like I said, mark my words, I have a feeling that Kendrick does this, pulls this stunt again and tries to diss Drake again, but it's not gonna work the same. As long as Drake makes sure everything is like run tightly and nothing leaks out, like I don't think Kendrick even has a chance if there's a round two in terms of a battle. Drake's a better rapper than Kendrick. He's a better artist than Kendrick. He's better at everything than Kendrick. So the only way Kendrick was able to win is if he was dissing and saying stuff that, you know, would get people's attention or would cause people to go crazy online. A lot of the people online anyways are trolls, so it's just like, who really cares what they have to say? But honestly, I think that's all that Drake needs to do. Just keep quiet, drop music. When you drop your music, let the fans hear it, let the fans feel it, and it's just like things will go back into their natural order. Like the natural order is Kendrick being number 3 out of those top 3 guys. Even though Cole, you know, did what he did, Cole is still better than Kendrick in a lot of people's eyes, and he's still better than Kendrick in my opinion too. So all Drake has to do, like I said, is really drop music and be consistent, and things will go back in his favor. But yeah, let me know what you guys think, man. I think we'll see Drake back to where he needs to be and he's supposed to be. I think he wins this lawsuit with UMG. He regains his status. He drops a classic album in a few months, and Kendrick basically, like I said, goes back to where he was supposed to be, at the back of the pack. So let me know what you guys think. If you guys like the video, like, comment, subscribe. I try to respond to all the comments if people have them, whether good or bad. So yeah, let me know what you guys think under the video.